Guys, welcome back once again to the Next Man Up podcast. So good, as always, to have you along with us for another episode. And it's also good to have you part of this community that is about being and raising healthy and godly men. You know this, my name is Mark, and once again, I'm honored to bring you another episode today. Today's episode is part 2 of a conversation that John and I were having around what does it mean to be a man. And if you haven't listened to part 1, let me encourage you to stop here and to go back to last week's episode and listen to that first as we set the table for why we're having this conversation, share some of our own story, and really bring you current to where we're going to pick up with the conversation today, which is really the character qualities, the characteristics, the 8 things that I'm using today to really define what it means to be a healthy and godly man. Now, if you listened to last week's episode already, you know that this isn't so much about teaching you, telling you what to think, as it is about inviting you through some of these suggestions, sharing these ideas to really think through this for yourself. We used a model last time that I think is worth sharing again as we begin part 2 of this episode, and that is adopt, adapt, and advance. So we'll share with you these 8 character qualities so that you can consider adopting them and then maybe adapting them specifically to your situation or your context, and then take them even further into advancing these ideas as you work at being a healthy and godly man and then raising that youngling who's coming behind you to be a healthy and godly man himself. Okay, guys, that's enough of a preamble. Let's pick up right where we left off last week with part 2 of What is a Man? So maybe this is a good transition point to kind of get to, okay, Mark, we've heard your story again. We've heard John's story. Like what is it? What is this stake in the ground? And so I guess I want to approach it in 2 phases, kind of like the phases of my evolution, and start with what came out of the work that I was doing for me and for my boys specifically. And I remember talking to a handful of guys, just asking them the question, like, if you could pinpoint manhood to a word or begin to define manhood with a word or two, what words would it be? What comes forth? And as I listened to what they were saying and kind of processed it through my own lens and own experience, there were 4 words that surfaced. And those 4 became the way that I guided my boys toward the target. Like, this is how we're going to show up as Stand for Men. This is what it means to be a Stand for Man. This is what it means to, in your context, these are the qualities that I am wanting to call out and draw out in you and to celebrate as you complete your initiation journey and cross that threshold into manhood. So the 4 qualities were 2 spiritual and 2 more human, if you will. It was courage and honor on the kind of the human side, like having that bold. Well, here's the definitions. I'm kind of mumbling. Here are the ways that I define those. So courage, I think of this way: the ability to face fear and adversity and not be overcome, rather than retreating or hiding in or from the moment. Courage. That was something that I wanted to foster in my own life and really wanted to foster and develop in the lives of my boys. The second one here is honor. The posture of respect and esteem toward others, and a resolve to right conduct in your relationships with them, as opposed to being judgmental, arrogant, or selfish in your conduct and interactions with others. So how are you leading yourself? Courage. How are you interacting with others? Honor. And then on the more spiritual side, it was faith and love. So faith being this, believing that we have a divine Father who loves us and is actively working on our behalf for our good and the good of others. The opposite is believing we are nothing more than chance or simply relying on scientific observation and not acknowledging the mystery or the unknown of life, faith. And then finally, love, the decision to actively and purposefully pursue the well-being of those for whom you care for and have influence, including yourself, rather than behavior that is focused only on self-gratification and gain. Courage, honor, faith, and love. That's where I started.
Mm-hmm.
And I think those are still like foundational. But my understanding has evolved since then. So let me pause there and just get your reaction, your thoughts on those four before we go further.
Well, there's a lot you could say here. My immediate thought was to the idea of the rite of passage, kind of event. And, that happens in that young man. It's now, quote, a man. These four things aren't automatically, oh, you have all the courage you're ever going to need because you did this rite of passage.
Right. That's right.
It is an ongoing journey. So as I'm listening to you define those, I just think that's helpful to everybody to understand you're on a journey of courage. You're on a journey of honor and faith and love. Accepting those as qualities that make me a man is step one, but it's not a one and done.
That's right. Yeah, you don't graduate to the point where you've got it figured out. None of these will we ever fully master in this lifetime. And it's entirely possible we never fully master them in the next lifetime either. We just might have a little bit longer to work and grow in them. But you're 100% right, John. Like that moment, that transition moment from boyhood to manhood says you're ready. You understand where you're headed. You understand your responsibility. You know what's required, and you're ready to be received into this community. It does not say you've got it all figured out, you've mastered everything, and you're good to go. Welcome. Like, go take a seat in the corner, put your feet up, we'll serve you some cold beverages and some snacks, and you can watch the game. Like, nothing in life works like that. Neither does this. So you're spot on. The invitation into the community of men is to take your place and to fulfill your role and to continue to grow in these qualities, plus some more that we'll get to here in a minute.
Right. So, I'm 54. I still don't have those four, I don't have my degrees in all of them, and I'm perfect in them. So it's just a good reminder for all of us to determine how do we go about evaluating ourselves? What reflection do we need to do? It's not just am I a man? It's how am I doing in those four things, and whatever, as you said, someone else advances. Is that right?
Yeah.
If they come up with a list of 8, whatever your list is you're working from, making the list is only step one.
That's right. So as I've mentioned, so that was what got me started. That's where I landed. It was enough to get going, but like most things, like the good things in life, they continue to grow and evolve. And part of what I also realized, and I was toggling. I knew I was aware of this at the time, but I was toggling between. I had 2 boys and I had a daughter. Still do. And I wanted to make a target that she could also see and work toward. And so one of the things that I've realized over the last few years is those aren't exclusive to men. Honor and love and faith and courage, like those are characteristics that women can develop and do and should. They weren't necessarily specific to men or to the masculine. And I think even some of the other four characteristics we'll get into here in a minute, you could make that argument that, well, these are more human characteristics, or there are ways that you can become a good human. And so it gets to be kind of difficult to say this is exclusively for male, or that is exclusively for female. And so, like, making a distinction that there are general stereotypes between male and female, there are general stereotypes of gifting and energy and tendencies that men have versus women, but it isn't just exclusive. And even in the process of expanding into four more here, capturing the tendencies of males also acknowledges that again, it's not exclusive to men. Let me say it this way: there are tendencies, there are stereotypes between the sexes, and when God took his image, divided it, and said, I'm going to give some of my image into the man to bear and some into the woman to bear, there was a distinction and a separation that isn't just purely black and white, cut and dry, but it's as if God said, I'm going to give half of who I am, so to speak, for it to be on display through the male, and the other half on display through the female. And so what does that look like? Like, if there are general and overlapping, what does it look like to get a little bit more specific? And how can we best represent, in our limited understanding, with our limited vantage point, how can we best represent for the side of the male what God intended when he said, Adam, go be my image bearer as male? Does that make sense? You tracking with me?
Mm-hmm. I am, and I'm gonna. I don't mean to take us off on this tangent, but I appreciate the lens that you just gave us. That females, can have these same four things, but it's going to potentially look different and play out differently. So, for example, questions to apply this. What does it look like for a mother to have courage? And what does it look like for a mother to love her once abusive uncle? Just if you take those words and ask life applicable questions, you're right. It's the same, but it's different.
Yeah.
So, for example, two women came to my mind. One I've never met, but I just saw an article of a high schooler in, I think it was California, a girl who I think she scored 2 touchdowns. She's on the high school football team, and she scored 2 touchdowns. Okay. Well, that took a certain amount of courage.
For sure.
Right. Does that mean, what does that mean? You follow me?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And I'm thinking about ladies who feel called to be pastors. The courage that takes, the faith that takes to follow that calling, that's big. So I appreciate you giving that hint that we all need to look at what it means to be a man or a woman, and at the same time distinguish that for yourself.
John
in
Eldridge,
this case, men.
Yeah. So I love your point. Thank you. John Eldridge uses this language when he's talking to men, the masculine energy. versus the feminine energy. And I think that's kind of what you're getting into. Like, how does the feminine energy exercise courage in the moment? How does the masculine energy exercise courage or foster courage in the moment? It may be same situation, but the expression of courage could look totally different between male, female. And of course, it looks different between individual and individual, regardless of sex. But yes, there's that masculine energy that's part of the image bearing process that we have, and there's the feminine energy part of it. Let me expand, get to these other four. So we had courage, honor, faith, and love. Since then, if you were to ask me, Mark, what do you think it means to be a man? Here's what I would add to that list. Four more. The first is responsibility, not necessarily in any certain order, which I define this way: the act of owning your choices and the consequences that result from those choices. The opposite of which is playing the victim and expecting rescue from somebody else. Responsibility. Integrity. The resolve to be and live consistent with who you are and what you believe, rather than being and doing in the moment what is easiest or most expedient to please or appease others. The third is strength. The power, whether physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, to stand strong and not be moved, to know who you are and where you are going. The opposite of this is weakness, which leads to compromise or the inability to be who you want to be or do the things that you want to do. And then finally, leadership, the ability to guide yourself and influence others toward a vision of the future that does not yet exist, in contrast to lacking command of yourself and not engaging in opportunities to influence or impact others for good. So those are the four more that I've added to kind of round out my understanding of what does it mean to be a man. A man is a person of courage. A man has honor. A man has faith and love. A man is responsible, has integrity, has strength, and a man is a leader. Hey guys, quick pause before we continue on with this conversation. I am looking for 6 to 8 dads who want to level up their fathering game. I'm talking about going deep in your own transformation so you can show up at your best for and with your kids. This will be a 10-week journey together, including group coaching, deep discussion, video training, and you'll also get an advanced copy of a book that will be released sometime into the future. All of this is part of this group experience to help you be at your best as a dad and for your kids. Now, look, I know this isn't for everybody, but if this is resonating with you, if you feel this stirring interest in you, all I'm asking for you right now is to just let me know. Head on out to the website, thenextmanup.com/dadgroup, and just get signed up. There's more information to come down the road, but all I'm asking right now is just to let me know that you are interested so that I can get you additional information. The web address, once again, is thenextmanup.com/dadgroup. Head on out there, get yourself signed up, and I will be back in touch with you soon. Okay, back to the conversation.
So I guess my question, Mark, would be, what led you to add those four? Maybe a different way is, why did the other four need four more?
So good question. I think it's because, in part, what I said around, okay, what does a more masculine energy expression of manhood look like? And when we talk about men in general, one of the things that comes up is strength. So as an example, men talk about power and strength, and often it's too small, right? It's muscles. or it is like dominance in a business setting, or dominance in an athletic competitive environment. But as I was thinking about, well, what does it mean to be a man, and where does strength play in, and how does one define strength in a bigger context? I'm like, yeah, that doesn't fully come through in the first four. Same with responsibility or integrity. Taking responsibility, owning your choices, owning the consequences of those choices, whether they're desired consequences or not. Like that is how I want to show up. It's how I want my boys to show up. And yes, it's how I want my daughter to show up as well. But like we as men, maybe another reason why, to answer your question, we as men have in so many ways just not taken responsibility for the things that we've done. Or we try to shirk the consequences and shortcut them or do an end around them. Like we don't own it, and we don't want to embrace or deal with the consequences. And so, like, well, what does it look like to be responsible and to accept and own that? And same thing for integrity, and same thing for leadership. Like there's lots of language in the Bible about men leading. And we did an episode on this not too long ago, on understanding that in a better light with the help of Tim Mackey and others. But there still is that example that Jesus sets of leadership, servant leadership. There's the invitation in Old Testament and New Testament writers for us as men to lead. So it just seemed important to me to capture that leadership component as well. And again, John, like this is today where there's 8. It may be that there are more down the road. One of the guys that, Bryce, we talked to him last episode. He added another one to his target as we were talking. There's another guy that we've spoken to in this context on the show a couple times, Eric Browning. He's got a list of 9 or 10. The first time I talked to him, it was 1 or 2 shorter than the second time I talked to him. So even his definition is continuing to evolve and grow. But I expect that to be the case for this one as well. But it seemed like it needed to be rounded out a bit more to the place where it felt comfortable like it does today, and still not there, right? Like you said, in the journey of mastering these, it may be that these 8 become 9 or 10 down the road. Who knows?
So I have a thought here, and it may not have been on your agenda for our conversation, but I'm wondering if it would be helpful for us to think about the different phases, it's not the right word, different settings that men find themselves. And do they show up better as a man in the home versus at work versus at the bar, wherever? I've never really asked that or thought that out loud. It seems like that might be an interesting exercise. How am I showing up? How would I rate myself? Whatever. As a man under my roof versus at the job. Is it the same? Am I the same everywhere?
Mm.
Do I exude the same courage everywhere? Do you follow me?
I do. And the first thing that comes to mind is based on what standard? So back to, we need a target. We need we need a standard by which we can measure ourselves. That's more than just, I didn't say this before, but that's more than just, well, I'm a nice person. I'm kind of I'm a good guy, right?
Right.
You know, like we need more than that in order to answer your question. Now, I do think that if guys are honest, and we're not always good at being honest, but if we're honest, we know like something just doesn't feel right at work, or I'm different when I'm hanging with the guys and we've had a couple and it's late, or I'm not the same at home as I am in the office, or I'm different Monday to Friday than I am on Sunday. I think if we're honest with ourselves, we will know we know that there are differences, which comes back to the point on integrity. Being
Right.
who you were created to be and consistent with who you want to be, regardless of the setting. And that's hard.
Well, yeah, because there's going to be situations where you feel like you are the alpha person in the room, or you want to be, whatever. And you're going to be challenged about, is this the right manly thing to do here? Godly thing to do here? What is my role in this situation? And man, that's 500 episodes right there. But I think that's a really useful understanding of, all right, we have these 8 things, but how do they play out in every position that I find myself? It's not just, certainly I want that to be at the my family life, my relationship with my wife, that needs to be at the top, that I'm really pursuing being a man there. But what about the rest of the world that I engage, and how am I showing up there?
Yeah, right. Like, we will never master this in this lifetime.
Right.
And even if you are doing well, there's more. And if you're not doing well, obviously there's more. And about the time you think you got it figured out, especially in one context, well, guess what? You're going to face some adversity or some temptation in another context that reveals like, oh, maybe I'm not doing as well as I thought I was.
I call that pulling an Abraham. Do you know why?
No, tell me.
Well, he'll have to tell me when I meet him if I'm right. But Abraham occasionally seemed to be doing okay, and then he would make some bonehead decision like, what were you thinking?
Right.
Particularly in regards to his wife.
Right. Like, oh, she's my sister.
Yeah, like, what? And even the ruler that he did that with, like, this is John Gregory paraphrase here, but like, what were you thinking?
Right.
Why did you do that? So we'll have Abraham moments as much as we want to really genuinely, passionately want to be men of God. We're going to have moments.
Yeah.
And there's a test right there. What do we do in those moments that show that we really are on a journey, and we get it, and we can pause in that moment and be the image of God that God wants me to be in that moment when I pulled an Abraham.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And so it can come back to, well, what standard are you going for? And have you set the bar high enough? Like there's a temptation in my life. I'm past it, but there's a temptation in my life to set the bar in a way that I know I could hit it. I got that. I got that. It's kind of like setting the goal after you've already reached the mark to be like, I'm good. Right. I got that. Rather than continuing to stretch and grow. But when we don't stretch and grow and continue to reach for something more, then we atrophy. You know this, you're a runner. If you're not running and pushing yourself, your muscles are going to atrophy. Your times are going to drop. Your distance is going to suffer. You have to keep going and pushing. This is how life works. And I can say it with certainty today, although it is relatively new understanding and acceptance for me to be able to say it and to live it out. But unless we set the bar high, cast a big vision for where we're going, we're going to settle. We're going to settle. We're going to settle for less than we could be, less influence and impact than we could have, less than God wants for us. And as a result, we're going to atrophy.
Yeah, this is probably another topic as well, but now you're touching on well, I'm thinking of where does the ego fit in this?
Mm,
Because some of our goals are not what God really has for us, even though they may sound really worth going after. Um, so I won't go far down that road, but there's some interesting conversation to have about goal setting when it comes to what is it, how am I defining myself as a man based on the goals that I'm setting for myself, and are they achievable, and what happens when I don't meet them, and all that kind of stuff.
yeah. Yeah. So I'm thinking of the mission really of the Next Man Up, which is to be and to raise healthy and godly men. And what does it look like to be healthy in your goal setting or in your leading at home? What does it look like to be healthy in how you are leading yourself? And whether that's physically or financially or mentally, right? All of that. Like,
Mm-hmm.
what does it look like to be a healthy and godly man? And I think we should come back to that goal topic as we turn into the next year. But in this context, I'm comfortable today saying that if I aim for these 8 character qualities
Mm-hmm.
as I've defined them, now again, this is the invitation to wrestle with this and think on this on your own, to not just adopt it, but adapt it and advance it in your own life. But for me, with these definitions and these qualities, I'm confident that if that's my direction, that I'm going to end up in that healthy and godly man space.
Well, I guess we can. What's today? October 21st. Next year on this date, we can see how you're doing.
That's true. In fact, maybe that
If you
is.
so chose.
In fact, maybe that is part of how I will think about rolling into next year. Just
Mm-hmm.
giving myself a rating on each of these. In fact, I like that. I really like that. I'm gonna take that one away, and maybe our listeners can be invited to do that as well. Like, whether you have a definition or you work off of somebody else's, maybe it's time to do a little bit of a self eval and come back to that down the road and see how you've moved the needle in a positive way.
Yeah, not to be self-promoting. However, if you are in the space like, man, that would be awesome to self-evaluate, but I hate self-evaluating and I don't even trust myself to do it. Well, then find yourself a coach,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
whether that's a professional one or whatever. Just find somebody in your life that could help you do that. If it's not a natural, um, I'm not sure what the right word is here, but if it's not something natural that comes naturally to you on your own, then get somebody to help you. And well, let's be real here. It may even come naturally to you,
Mm-hmm.
but a one-sided conversation is limited into what could happen when you talk with someone else and engage them on your evaluation. You have blind spots.
True that. Well, guys, let me finish this episode with this conversation with a couple of questions for you to ponder. This is the part where you can take this and adapt and advance, or as we often say, you turn the information into transformation. A couple questions to leave you with. One, when your son asks what a man is, what will you tell him? What do you tell him? What do you tell him with your words? And what do you tell him with your actions? What definition are you living for him, for him and your family? To what coordinates are you orienting your life? Where are you leading him? Variations on the same theme, but essentially, where are you going as a man and where are you leading your boy as a man? That's what we want to invite you into. Whether you use the definition, the character qualities that we've shared here, whether you use what came up in the conversation with Bryce last time, or go back to conversations with Eric Browning or Robert Lewis and the great work he has done with Raising a Modern Day Knight. It doesn't matter to us what definition you use, as much as it matters that you have a definition that fits into the space of what it means to be and raise a healthy and godly man. And that's what you're going after. So what does that look like for you? And if you're operating with a definition, thanks to John's inspiration and guidance, give yourself a rating. How are you doing with your own definition? What needs to change? As we come to the end of this year and we start to think about what we're going after for the next year, maybe this is a good time for you to evaluate how are you doing as a man, and what do you want to work on and grow and change as you go into next year. Some questions for you guys to ponder on this topic of what does it mean to be a man. John, thank you for your questions, for your insight, your prompts are always so good. I like the energy that you bring and the perspective and the lens that you bring into this, because it always challenges me to think about it differently, bigger, to think about it better. Any last comments before we close it out today?
Right on.
Okay.
That's all I got.
Okay.
Right on.
Or in the words of Matthew McConaughey, all right, all right, all right.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
All right, guys, thank you for being with us once again, for being part of this community. We wish you all the best, and we'll be back once again. Same bat time, same bat channel next week. Until then, adios. To send us your comments or questions, you can email us at feedback@thenextmanup.com. The theme music is by Jacob Stanifer at Jacob Stanifer Music, and this show is part of the NRT Podcast Network.